Are we seriously going to watch our front office fumble a massive contract and let a 1,500-yard superstar walk right out the door? George Pickens has officially vanished from the team's latest workouts, and the tension inside the facility is reaching an absolute boiling point. And as if the receiver drama wasn't enough, we urgently need to break down the sheer draft day miracle that somehow dropped a generational defender right into our laps. If you want the raw, unfiltered truth about our team every single day, go ahead and hit that like button, share this video, and subscribe to the channel right now. We have a massive storm brewing on the offensive side of the ball, and it revolves entirely around the deeply frustrating situation with George Pickens. As of Tuesday, Pickens was a complete no-show at the team's voluntary workouts. Now, let's be perfectly clear and take a deep breath before we totally panic. These are not full-on organized team activities just yet. We are technically just entering Phase 2 of the off-season program. This is really just the first structured team event since Pickens officially signed his franchise tag. But that begs a serious rhetorical question. Are we about to witness our front office repeat their agonizing history of refusing to pay elite talent until the very last possible second? It is true that everything happening at the facility right now is strictly voluntary. In the reality of the National Football League, the word voluntary essentially means you do not have to be there until mandatory minicamp kicks off about a month from now. But what makes this absence feel so incredibly heavy is that CeeDee Lamb was right there in the building, working hard and setting the tone. There is typically a massive turnout for these early voluntary sessions, so when your newly tagged, highly explosive wideout is nowhere to be found, it naturally sets off alarm bells for every single diehard fan watching from the outside. Honestly, I am trying my absolute hardest to keep a level head and not worry about Pickens missing these early reps. The real test of his dedication comes later. If he decides to skip the mandatory minicamp, then we are having a completely different, much darker conversation about his future with this franchise. It would be absolutely mind-boggling if he actually skipped the mandatory sessions. I genuinely cannot remember the last time a premier player voluntarily chose to just bleed cash by racking up massive, unforgiving daily fines. Let's think about this logically. If his ultimate master plan was to skip minicamp, or hold out during the intense heat of training camp to force the organization's hand, the most obvious move would have been to simply refuse to sign the franchise tag in the first place. The front office was never going to rescind that tag. So, putting pen to paper just to stay home and pout doesn't make a shred of sense. Even if he is totally furious that there isn't a massive long-term deal sitting on his kitchen table right now, which, as a fan who wants players to get what they deserve, I completely understand, I fully expect Pickens to be in the locker room when it becomes mandatory. If you sign the tag and then refuse to show up, you have completely evaporated your own leverage and essentially set your own paycheck on fire. We need to lay out the critical timeline that everyone should have circled on their calendars. June 1st marks the official beginning of the true, regular OTAs. June 16th is when mandatory minicamp kicks off, and that is exactly when the heavy fines start rolling in for anyone missing in action. Then comes the absolute do-or-die date, July 15th. That is the hard deadline for any franchise tag extension. If the front office cannot get a long-term contract finalized and signed by that specific July 15th deadline, he cannot sign a multi-year deal for the rest of the season, no matter what happens. Even if a blockbuster trade goes down, the window for an extension is bolted shut until next year. Then, somewhere around July 23rd, the pads finally come on for the grueling, sweaty grind of training camp. So, why is there this sudden, chilling freeze from the front office? Why have they actively chosen to play hardball instead of instantly securing a phenomenal playmaker who just torched opposing secondaries for almost 1,500 yards last season? According to plugged-in league insiders, there are three primary reasons holding up the guaranteed money, and honestly, listening to these excuses is enough to drive any passionate fan completely insane. First, the team is already paying CeeDee Lamb an absolute fortune, sitting at an average of roughly $34 million a year. The front office is apparently terrified of the salary cap gymnastics required to carry two of the highest-paid wide receivers in the entire league. Second, they are looking at Pickens as the new kid on the block. He doesn't have that deep-rooted, homegrown history with this organization. He wasn't drafted here, and he wasn't developed in our system from day one. And third, which is by far the most frustrating point, there are still lingering questions about him from his previous stops. Let's address that last excuse directly, because it is infuriating. The front office basically wants him to prove it all over again. They want to see the elite on-field production perfectly matched with pristine off-the-field focus for another full calendar year before they commit. But here is where their logic completely falls apart for me. I entirely reject the pathetic excuse of claiming we can't afford two unbelievably talented wide receivers. Having too much talent is a beautiful luxury, not a curse. That is exactly like complaining that your premium steak is simply too juicy, or your expensive lobster is far too buttery. It is sheer nonsense. You pay your great players, plain and simple. We literally just watched the Philadelphia Eagles do the exact same thing by paying their star duo, and it has brought them immense, sustained success. We need to be serious as an organization if we actually want to hoist a Lombardi trophy anytime soon. As for the lingering character questions, yes, his time in Pittsburgh was constantly clouded by persistent drama regarding his overall consistency and his mental focus. Even though his 2025 campaign with us was a massive, undeniable success on the gridiron, the front office still feels totally justified in making him sweat it out for another year. It is the persistent Pickens problem perception. His stint in Pittsburgh didn't end gracefully, and while this franchise has always had a much higher tolerance for Hollywood-style drama than other conservative organizations, they are still incredibly hesitant to hand over a blank check. His camp probably felt his unbelievable production should have instantly reset the wide receiver market for him. If he had been a true unrestricted free agent, maybe he easily commands a monstrous deal. But one elite season on a new team doesn't magically erase the past in the eyes of the guys writing the checks. If he balls out again this year, his price tag is going to be absolutely astronomical. They can legally tag him again next year for around $32.8 million, which sounds somewhat reasonable for an isolated, one-year rental, but staring down a third franchise tag after that becomes mathematically impossible. If Pickens plays the role of the good soldier, shows up to camp, and completely dominates defensive backs all year long, his contract demands next offseason are going to start with a 4. As in $40 million a year. Question of the day, will George Pickens still be wearing our team's uniform in 2027? Get down in the comments section right now and let your voice be heard. Type yes if you firmly believe he stays long-term, or type no if you think he is destined to walk out the door. Now, there has been some absolutely wild chatter among analysts lately trying to artificially pit CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens against each other. They are trying to compare our locker room to the A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith dynamic in Philly. Some talking heads are floating this ridiculous scenario. They are asking, if CeeDee deals with his fluky injuries again and Pickens has another monster, dominant year, does the team pivot, trade CeeDee, and choose to build around Pickens? I absolutely despise this hypothetical scenario with a burning passion. First off, if Lamb gets hurt, his trade value instantly plummets because an injured, incredibly expensive wideout isn't fetching a king's ransom on the open market. On top of that, Lamb carries a staggering $55.3 million in dead cap money if you tried to move on from him. You are essentially, mathematically married to him. But beyond the pure finances, let's just be brutally honest with ourselves. CeeDee Lamb is a generational, extraordinary football player. He is simply a better, more complete receiver than George Pickens. Outside of a few highly publicized, frustrating drops in that one specific game against the Eagles, Lamb has been the ultimate, unstoppable, consistent performer year in and year out. Let's not suffer from sudden amnesia and forget what he did in 2023, or what he did in 2022. Let's not ignore the fact that his yards per route run last year was still significantly higher than what Pickens produced. Why are we rushing to manufacture a toxic rivalry in our own locker room? I am just going to sit back and thoroughly enjoy having an outrageously awesome wide receiver duo. It really is not that complicated. Alright, we need to shift gears smoothly right here because we have to talk about Caleb Downs and how the football gods miraculously smiled upon us during the NFL draft. This was an absolute daylight heist, and we sincerely owe a massive, heartfelt thank you to the New York Giants for completely fumbling their draft board. Here is the unbelievable background on why the Giants bafflingly chose to pass on an elite, game-changing safety like Caleb Downs in the first round. New York selected Ohio State linebacker Arvell Reese at number 5 overall. Our front office was aggressively trying to maneuver the board, desperately attempting to jump all the way up to number 9 to secure Caleb Downs before he vanished into thin air. Meanwhile, the Giants eventually ended up taking offensive lineman Francis Mauigoa. So why did the Giants let a generational defensive chess piece slip right through their fingers? Because they convinced themselves that their defensive quota was completely fulfilled the second they drafted Arvell Reese at number 5. The word leaking out of draft rooms across the league is that the Giants were stubbornly, unequivocally dead set on using one of their top 10 picks on an offensive player to desperately support their second-year quarterback, Jackson Dart. They absolutely refused to go back-to-back on defense under any circumstances. If they had been willing to go defense twice, Reese and Downs would both be in New York right now ruining our Sundays. But their narrow-minded plan was strictly to help out Jackson Dart at all costs. Honestly, we need to send expensive fruit baskets to the Arizona Cardinals and the Tennessee Titans front offices. The Cardinals shockingly went with Notre Dame running back Jeremiah Love, and the Titans completely stunned the entire league by taking wide receiver Carnell Tate. Those two wildly unpredictable, off-the-wall moves directly pushed Arvell Reese down the board to the Giants at 5. If Jeremiah Love or Carnell Tate hadn't been drafted in those exact spots, the Giants likely would have sprinted to the podium to announce Caleb Downs at number 5. But the dominoes fell perfectly in our favor. The Giants locked in Reese, felt forced to grab offensive line help later with Mauigoa, and essentially gift-wrapped Caleb Downs, allowing our front office to secure a true cornerstone defender. It is truly mind-blowing how a few surprise picks in the top 5 completely altered the trajectory of our entire franchise. Getting a transcendent talent like Caleb Downs is exactly what this defense desperately needed. Keep your eyes glued to the facility, because this off-season ride is about to get incredibly intense.